Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first TMA virtual briefing with the Illinois gubernatorial candidates. My name is Rich Carter. I'm TMA's government affairs consultant, and I'll be the moderator for today's briefing. We're joined by TMA news editor Fran Eaton, and our special guest today is JB Sullivan, candidate for the Republican nomination for Illinois governor. Good morning, Fran and Jesse.
Good morning, Rich.
With hundreds of state and federal candidates battling for their party's nomination in the June 28th primary election in Illinois, TMA members and their employees are in a great position to help decide who will represent them in Springfield and Washington, D.C. going forward. The most significant race for TMA members on the June 28th primary ballot is undoubtedly the Republican gubernatorial race, with 6 candidates vying to take on incumbent Governor JB Pritzker in November. Knowing what's at stake in the race for governor, TMA reached out to the candidates and requested their participation in individual virtual briefings with TMA members. Today is the start of those briefings, and more will be coming in the weeks leading up to the June 28th election. We're going to spend the next half hour having a conversation with JB Sullivan to learn his background, why he's running for governor, and how we can help TMA members thrive and create good paying jobs for the people of Illinois. Now, I'll turn it over to TMA news editor Fran Eaton, who will introduce our special guest, give him a few minutes to tell us why he's running for governor, and ask him the first few questions. Fran?
Good morning, everybody. It's a lovely day in Chicago again. It's sunny. I hope later, maybe today. Not yet, but we're looking forward to having a great day. And this is so cool that we're getting to listen to personally to each one of these candidates that have agreed to talk with us. They're running for governor. They'd like to take the state to the next level. So JB Sullivan is our first one that is going to be speaking to us. He is a 5th generation Illinoisan, a political outsider, and a first-time candidate hoping to become Illinois Republican Party's nominee in the 2022 race for governor. As an Army civilian in Afghanistan, Mr. Sullivan helped set up police forces. As a venture capitalist in Central Illinois, he has created jobs in some of the toughest places on earth and says he knows how to do the same here at home. He's a husband and father to 5 young children and 2 foster daughters. Mr. Sullivan, thank you so much for coming today and giving your time to our members. Our members would like to hear more about your background and why you are running for governor.
Great. Well, Fran, thanks for having me. Thank you so much for those who are out there listening and going to watch this on video later. But I'm an outsider, as Fran said, and I stepped into this because I love our home. I love Illinois so much. You know, one of 8 kids running around in the cornfields of Central Illinois, working on a farm, and I love our home, but I hate our politics. I'm from right where Abraham Lincoln first moved into politics in Central Illinois, and you know, honesty, character, integrity, all the things he represents are all the things I feel like our government now does not represent in Illinois and around the world. And so it's like we've got to get back to those values. My background is really on the business side. I came back from Afghanistan and went to Stanford Business School, and so it really was an amazing opportunity to get a master's in business there, where they were talking all about technology, the future of industry, and I got to then go out and create my own business to back entrepreneurs in emerging markets around the world, creating those new industries and creating jobs, and started to have some really good success with that. And it was in having that success, you know, backing a company, for instance, in Pakistan that was the country's first, you know, what's going to be their first billion-dollar technology company, when it was just 2 guys with a pitch deck and an idea. That was happening all around the world, and felt like, man, my own home is falling apart. What's my obligation to my neighbor? And we need to make this a business-friendly environment again in Illinois. And so, you know, I've jumped into this race. It is awful for all the reasons you guys would think. Illinois politics is awful from the outside, but it's also really reaffirming, because I get to represent the values of police, you know, unborn children. I get to represent the value of small business owners in our government again. And so that's what I want to do here. So I hope this can be more than just a one-way, you know, conversation. It can really be two-way, and I can learn from all of you of what would you like to see done to make this a great state again, a business-friendly state again. So look forward to the conversation to have this morning. Thank you.
Well, we'll begin with first question this morning. In 2018, Illinois manufacturers accounted for 12.54% of the total output in the state, employing 9.61% of the workforce. In 2019, before the COVID crisis, Illinois manufacturing total output shrank by 0.5 point, while they were still employing 9.74% of the workforce. During that same time frame, the state's manufacturing sector output fell from 108 billion to 106 billion. In the same time frame, the industry's average compensation grew from 87,000 in 2017 to 90,500 in 2019. Those latest numbers simply show the crucial industry's trend that grows and goes back for over a decade. We have been losing ground a little at a time. Illinois manufacturing workforce and output is diminishing, while neighboring states are in direct contrast. How would a Sullivan administration address this crisis?
Yeah, thank you. So the first off is just to mention COVID. I would have handled the situation and crisis totally differently. And moving forward, I will on day one sign an executive order that will never require mask mandates and vaccine mandates on the people of Illinois. These emergency executive orders that have gone on for 28 months, it is not the way that the executive authority was set up to do. That was supposed to be a 30-day emergency. 2 weeks to flatten the curve has become 2+ years of a lot of these COVID lockdowns. And you look at states like Florida that prioritize small business owners, didn't shut them down, no difference in COVID rates, but huge differences on economic activity and output. So one, you will have in me a governor that prioritizes freedom and liberty and is not going to be closing down businesses that want to stay open. So that's number one. Two, the way that I look at this for manufacturing sector and businesses is I want to get our economy humming again. And if we're going to do that, then I see 3 core areas. One is taxes, 2 is talent, and 3 is the energy costs that we have. And I know, we might talk more about the energy part a little bit later, but I would love to address taxes and talent. So for taxes, the reason why so many people have fled, 120,000 people last year alone out of Illinois are high tax burden. It's the same on small, families as it is on small business owners. Those taxes are out of control. So I am the only candidate in this race that has signed a taxpayer protection pledge saying, I commit to never raising taxes on the people of Illinois. Any new tax that comes across my desk, I'm going to veto it. I said, I'll get out a Sharpie as large as Donald Trump's and write veto across any bill that is trying to tax the people of Illinois more, because we don't have a revenue problem in the state of Illinois. We have a spending problem. And so our government spending has gotten out of control. So I am going to reduce the budget in the state of Illinois by $10 billion. And the way that I'm going to get there is by, one, taking on pension reform. We have to tackle our unfunded pension liability crisis. It's why Warren Buffett says he looks at a state, what is your unfunded pension liability, to decide if he'll make an investment in that state, because he doesn't want to be on the hook for repaying all of that debt. So right now we have one of the largest unfunded pension liabilities in the nation. We have to get that under control by making major reforms, which means any new people into the system, a 401k style change to the system. 2, we need to do consolidation in the government. We have more units of government than any state in the nation. We need to consolidate and streamline, make it more efficient. Next, we need to do a hiring freeze on government employees. We have way too many government workers per capita. Next, we're going to do a corruption patronage audit from my office. So a line-by-line corruption and patronage audit, because we've become way too much. You guys all know this. Mike Madigan and the way our government was built is essentially as a patronage network and creating jobs. So we're going to reduce all of those units of government, all of those hiring of government workers, the pension crisis, and start to grow our economy again. And we're going to save $10 billion out of the budget. We're going to pass back all of these savings to taxpayers. So our property taxes are the highest in the nation. So in order to reduce that property tax burden, we're going to have to cut the size of government and get those areas under control. So you have to ask yourself, you know, if you just compare the different candidates, why haven't the other candidates signed this taxpayer protection pledge? Why don't they refuse to raise taxes on the people of Illinois also? You can't tax your way out of our debt problem. You need to grow your way out of it. I have this business mindset. We are going to have a commitment to growth and grow our way out. Next up is talent. Our education system is broken in the state of Illinois. And what I've heard when I've talked with manufacturers around the state is they've told me, hey, we have a real talent pipeline problem. It is so hard to find good workers to come in and work. So what we need to do is actually create a better pipeline of talent in the state of Illinois. We have a college or bust mentality and model. That does not work. Loading up students with debt only to place them in a workforce that they're not prepared or ready for. So we're calling for school choice, which means that parents should be empowered, not these government union bosses for the teachers unions that have limited competition. So if dollars can follow your child rather than go straight to an institution, if you have a choice of where you want to send your kid to school, that allows things like private schools, charter schools. You know, I think of industry-led education and having industry step in and say, hey, we're going to work with high schools. We're going to run them in a way that we can have students ready for the workforce out of high school. And same with community colleges. We have to have a better pathway into the trades. And you know, there are other things we can do to attract the talent of the future to stay in Illinois rather than fleeing to these better run states. Also looking at things like tax credits for students who decide to stay. Say you do get an associate's degree, you had to take out a little bit of student loans. Doing that pre-tax rather than post-tax to make your payments back on your student loans is another idea. But really retaining the talent of the future and having them ready for the trades is something that I'm really passionate about and feel like school choice is the way to get there on. So when it comes to taxes and talent, these are the areas that I really want to push on to make sure we're ready to grow the manufacturing sector. And then we can talk energy next if you'd like.
When you're in the Schaumburg area, we'd love to have you come to the TMA headquarters and see the training center that we have for manufacturing. We just had related theory graduation and had 59 graduates, and it was very exciting. They have solid careers ahead for them in manufacturing, and but we'd love to have you come if you're in the area sometime. Drop by. Give us a heads up though, okay, that you're coming. All right, the third point that is a real concern to our members, and you mentioned it, is energy. That is a big deal. Next to payroll, that's one of their biggest expenses. And they tell us that it's one of the most expensive pressing expenses is their energy. So it of course allows their machines to run, keeps their facilities warm and cool, and it's beginning to be more and more of a demand on their resources. So last fall, of course, you know, Governor Pritzker signed into law Senate Bill 2408, which requires the state to abandon all non-renewable energies by 2050. Did we lose our candidate?
Sorry, no,
Okay.
I'm still here.
All right.
I just have to plug in my computer because I want to make sure we don't die here. So I'm so sorry about that.
Yeah, we don't want you to die when you're talking to us. Please don't do that. Okay. All right. Oh, he's still got an issue. Oh, we're gonna do this.
Yeah, sorry, still here, just plugging in my chart.
Okay.
We can hear you. Go ahead, Fran.
Can you think about what I'm going to ask you while you're doing that?
Yes, I can. Please keep going.
Okay. That, which is so appropriate that we're going to ask you a question about energy right now. and the issue of energy.
That's what reminded me of it. Okay, I'm good to go now. I just had to And thank you.
Okay, we're all set. Okay. Last fall, when he signed into the renewable energy, we're going to have to be totally on renewable energy by 2015, and the goal is to have us 50% by 2040. The law requires energy credits from sources such as wind, solar, geothermal sources, all kinds of things. Anything not coal-fired or natural gas. That's what the governor has planned ahead. Currently, there's a struggle with infrastructure and resources needed to move us towards that, even if we had the availability to do it. And we're concerned about the difficulty of obtaining those things and with the goal and to be within the law by 2015. What solutions to the difficult to fulfill mandates would a Sullivan administration offer our TMA small to mid-sized manufacturing companies?
This decision by JB Pritzker to have his own Green New Deal for Illinois is really a disaster. I'm a downstate guy, you know, I'm an outdoorsman. I love nature. I love the environment. I consider myself someone who wants to be good for the environment, but we need to take a market-based private sector approach to that rather than a government mandated approach that's going to shut down certain sectors of our energy grid, that's going to put the burden on our small business owners and to be honest, it's going to be also just regular households that are having to pay such higher costs in energy. It's wrong, and I'm going to push back to try to change it, to undo some of the legislation that is very harmful on small business owners on the energy cost side. So that is one, is I have a strong commitment to going back to that Green New Deal legislation that's going to be so terrible for us and trying to get parts of that overturned and repealed. The other area is really around cutting regulations, because I know constantly from what I've heard from small business owners in the manufacturing sector is they've told me, you know, we constantly get these unfunded mandates like you just talked about, where there's always a new bill put out there, a new legislative requirement that doesn't allow for the payment to transition over. So it's really an unfunded mandate, which we need to get rid of from government. I hate that they're constantly doing this to business owners, but also any of my friends in the manufacturing sector that just talk about these regulatory requirements, that it's people who want to pass legislation, these politicians who think, hey, this will help me get reelected because I'm doing something and I can put my name on a bill and get something passed. We have to cut the regulatory burden on small business owners, not be adding to it all the time. And so in me, you will find a champion of someone who says, not only do we need to lower taxes like crazy, we have to have a strong commitment, being a fiscal conservative like I am, we also need to cut regulatory requirements and make it as easy as possible for business owners to do business in the state, rather than constantly feel like, what do I need to do with the EPA, you know, stepping in, since we're talking the energy costs and, you know, the regulatory burdens. We have to push back strong against those agencies and units to say, no, we are going to make it easier for people to do business in the state of Illinois, rather than more and more hurdles for small business owners to jump through. Yeah, so you're going to find a strong champion in me of cutting regulations and trying to repeal the really bad parts of this Green New Deal for Illinois that JB Pritzker passed through, that is really going to harm our small businesses and our families that are going to try to afford energy costs in the state. And I am a pro-environment person. I'm someone who believes, you know, we should be transitioning over to cleaner energy sources over time, but that should be a market-based process, not the government jumping in, picking winners and losers, and trying to create these unfunded mandates on our small businesses.
Thank you. Well, speaking of the policies that are coming out of Springfield, we just every other year, Illinois, we watch the Illinois legislature and report on how they have voted, how the members have voted. And in the 102nd General Assembly that just finished, the voting record is dismal concerning the effect of public policy on Illinois small to mid-sized manufacturers. In TMA's most recent legislative scorecard, a discouraging 21 of 118 House members voted at least with with TMA's position at least 75% of the time. Only 21. And then only 12 of our 59 senators voted with TMA's policies. So how would a Sullivan administration work to reverse the state legislature's negativity towards TMA's small to mid-sized manufacturers? And how could TMA help you?
Yeah, thanks. Being an outsider to politics, being a business guy who wants to jump in to change our politics, I realize this is not just the governor's office. This is getting a new set, a next generation of conservative leaders to step into the legislature over time. That's the only way we're really going to change things in Illinois. And so I am going to be recruiting these other next generation conservatives. We need more Republicans. We need more people who feel like they have a business friendly stance. They actually do want to do all these things, lower taxes, lower our regulatory burden, not be trying to pass extra burdens on small business owners. We need people who prioritize that. And I'm going to be, as a next generation conservative myself, stepping in as an outsider. I am able to recruit in a whole new group of high character leaders who want what's best for the people of Illinois, not people who are beholden to special interests. So we've actually put together a plan, and I think corruption is the core cause of this reason, and it's built-in corruption. It's not even illegal corruption, it's legal corruption, which is pay to play that exists right now. It's all of the strong unions and others that have gotten so much undue influence and power in the system, the lobbyists and special interests that are working behind the scenes that really have these legislators in their pockets, because the general public isn't paying that much attention to what's going on, who's passing what bills. What they care about is who are those special interests that are funding their campaigns, getting them back in office so that they can keep running. Well, this anti-corruption legislation that we're going to push, that you guys could go on jessesullivan.com, check it out. We're actually the only campaign that's actually gone in on the key areas that matter most and created a plan. Most campaigns are hollow talking points. They come, they give a talking point, but the actual plan that sits behind that isn't there. But on our website, you can go see whether it's crime and public safety. We went together with law enforcement and we created our anti-crime plan. When it came to our education plan, we went to parents and we went to educators to say, what should we do to fix our education system? It's a novel concept and idea to actually include the people who are most impacted and affected by these legislative decisions and bringing together to the table those individuals. So I can tell you, in my administration, you guys will have a seat at the table. You guys will be sitting there with saying, hey, if we're ever going to pass anything that affects small business owners in the manufacturing sector, what should this be? What would you all like to see done? Because you're on the front lines. When I was in the military, you know, I was an Army civilian over in Afghanistan. It's really unheard of that you would have a top-down structure without allowing people who are closest to the problem helping to make the decision on that problem. You know, General McChrystal, team of teams, it's a way that's built into my DNA now, is the way you proceed in solving a problem is having the people most impacted by that decision involved in the decision-making process. And so I'd be giving you guys a seat at the table to help make those decisions on what we should be doing to move forward. But we need to recruit in next generation conservative leaders to the legislature. And for us, that means term limits. Politics should not be a career. Politics should be short-term, temporary public service. And we need to make sure we put in place term limits. We put in place a revolving door between legislator and lobbyist, so people aren't benefiting from, you know, these too cozy in bed with these special interests. And so I'm going to be a fighter for getting back to, you know, having a citizen-led legislature that is not beholden to special interests. And we have the people most affected by the decisions there with a seat at the table and making those decisions. So I'd love to learn, you know, from you all about like, what do you want to?
We're going to have some questions coming from these guys now. They're antsy and ready to go. So I'm going to hand that over to Rich. Thanks for watching the screen. Thanks so much. Thank you again, Mr. Sullivan. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jesse and Fran. Fran said now it's time for questions and answers. So for those of you on your computers, or if you're using the mobile app, you can type your question and submit it to the questions tab on the GoToWebinar control panel. I'll read the questions and ask Jesse to answer them. In the meantime, I'll ask Jesse the first question that was pre-submitted from a TMA member. The question is, on the November election ballot, Illinois voters will once again be asked whether or not to amend the state constitution. The proposed amendment would effectively ban and financially punish any employer for encouraging his or her employees to reject unionization of their business. No minimal requirements for business size or number of employees involved. Free market experts suggest the effort would suffocate the 21st century's booming gig economy workforce and independent contracting, as well as require non-union TMA members to restructure their companies to include third-party negotiators. How will you be voting on this ballot question, and why have you chosen to vote that way? Jesse?
Yeah, Amendment 1 would be a disaster for Illinois. We cannot allow super strong. Look, I believe in a level playing field to be able to make decisions. You know, public unions have gotten way too much power in the state of Illinois, and it ends up hurting the regular taxpayer. It's why we're in the situation we're in, where we're paying one of the highest tax burdens in the nation. And small business owners then stepping into that environment, they're on the hook for those high taxes, and we have to stop that unlevel playing field that the strong union bosses have negotiated for that power and that those special interests over time. We have to have a strong leader who's going to push back against that undue influence of that way too strong unlevel playing field that the union bosses have created in the state of Illinois. Amendment 1 would be a disaster because it moves it even further in that direction, and we would be in such a bad situation for our businesses. And somebody who wants to be a pro-business friendly environment and create that. I'm not anti-union. Private sector trade unions, they have a really strong place in our society, you know, to be able to negotiate in good faith, but that's a level playing field. What Amendment 1 does is it leverages way too much the power and ability of these union bosses to have too much undue influence and negotiating power. That's going to hurt taxpayers. It's going to hurt small business owners who just want to do business in the state of Illinois. And so that's the reason why I'm strongly against that amendment.
Thank you, Jesse. We have another question. The question is, Governor Pritzker's talked a lot about property tax relief. It's especially a major deal for manufacturers up in the Northern Illinois area. While it's not, you know, directly, property taxes aren't directly driven by the state, there are ways that the state can help reduce them. Do you have any thoughts on that or plans to reduce property taxes? Yeah,
the property tax burden is probably the #1 tax that we have to fix, or we're going to continue to see an exodus out of the state of Illinois. The overall tax burden is associated to the size and cost of government and doing business. That's why I said we need to save $10 billion. We need to cut out of the budget so that we can start to give that property tax relief. And they are at 1% over in Indiana. That should be the peg and the mark that we're trying to go for in Illinois, which would mean we need to cut it in half at least, our property tax burden. So we need to make major changes if we're going to make that happen. And so a lot of people say, yes, we should cut property taxes, but in order to do that, that's a lot of local education costs, which are really the bulk of that is paid towards administrators and retired teachers. Not even, you know, the existing classroom that those local property taxes are going towards. And so the whole system is broken right now. That's why I mentioned pension reform that we have to take on. That's not to cut your benefits. If you already have earned those benefits, you should get to keep those. My dad's a retired public school teacher. He said he wouldn't vote for me if I cut his pension, you know, but he earned it. We shouldn't be. But we need to change the whole system if we're going to move forward and be able to cut property taxes appropriately. That's why I'm calling for such strong action around cutting this $10 billion from the budget, because that's the only way we can lower the property tax burden to be able to make sure we're on par with our neighbors. Because, you know, if you can't compete with your neighbors, all of the manufacturers, I mean, everyone in this call must be facing it, to say, why am I not doing business just across the border? It would be so much easier on me. It's thank goodness for people's love of Illinois and their families and their rootedness in this state, because we have to make it a viable option to stay here rather than have to move to local states around us. So we have to be on par with those property taxes. Mitch Daniels did it. I would be following a really similar playbook to what Mitch Daniels did over in Indiana to try to bring about in Illinois.
Great, thanks so much. Well, actually, we've run out of time. So Jesse, do you have any closing thoughts for TMA members?
Yeah, just please consider going out and voting on June 28th for me as an outsider business person who really wants to change the state of Illinois. I am not beholden to any special interests. I'm someone who has a strong business background. I'm a free market capitalist. I feel like the way out of this problem for us is to celebrate the true Illinois heroes that are the job creators. And we need to make sure they are front and center and prioritized. They've been put on the back burner. They've been treated like they are a problem for the state rather than the solution for the state. And it's our small business owners in the manufacturing sector especially that we have to compete, not just against China, we have to compete against our surrounding neighboring states because we are just losing people there. In me, you will have a champion for small business owners and manufacturers. I will fight for you, and I'll make sure we get back to a state we can all be proud of, not despite our government, but because of our government. So thank you all, and yeah, please check out jessesullivan.com and see what you think, and please go out and vote on June 28th.
That's great. Thanks, Jesse. That'll do it for today's virtual briefing. I want to thank Jesse and Fran for joining us today, along with all of our TMA members who are on the webinar. As a reminder, you can register now at tmaillinois.org/events for our next two gubernatorial briefings, June 13th with Darren Bailey and June 14th with Gary Rabine. Thanks again and have a great day, everyone. Goodbye.
Hey. Yeah.